Welcome, NutritionRadio.org listeners. This is Lonnie Lowery, a university nutrition professor of over 20 years and podcast host of long-running shows like Iron Radio. Come on in. Weight management tips.
Hey, everybody. As the bumper said, we got another weight management tip today. Before I begin, I've been remiss about reading some of the comments that we get on our YouTube backup. So here is one. This refers to our vitamins and memory episode, is episode 82. If you're interested in nootropics, right, boosting mental performance, and I think a lot of lifters and athletes are, why would you not want an ergogenic effect on your intelligence as well, in a sense, your cognition? But Rocker75 Metalhead, he made a comment here. He says, as far as nootropics, I've been using 600 milligrams of alpha GPC and 500 milligrams of tyrosine along with my pre-workout coffee for over a year prior to my heavy training sessions, deadlift, front squat, overhead press, and I've noticed good focus for those sessions. I've recently, the past month or so, added dark chocolate, cacao, over 85%. So if you're not familiar, right, they're going to give you that percentage of how dark is the dark chocolate. You're looking for some of those cocoa flavanols. Added that to the pre-workout routine due to something I read about theobromine. So again, theobromine, it's a methylxanthine like caffeine, but a little bit different, right? And here he says this also seemed to help with focus, and I've noticed no caffeine jitters, which I would sometimes get with the coffee. Nootropics is a topic that's interested me on and off. It's definitely intriguing to have potential quote-unquote mental boosters for work, learning, and training. So I love this comment. I agree with almost all this. My exposure to alpha GPC was back in the day. It wasn't so much for cognition. I have seen data on tyrosine as a precursor to adrenaline in the body. It does kick up urinary metabolites of what used to be adrenaline in at least select people. So that was very suggestive. I did a particular corporate study on green tea extracts and tyrosine and whatnot, and it seemed to be having an effect, at least in that case. So this is, I think this is on track, Rocker75 Metalhead. So cool stuff. We're all lucky to have a knowledgeable central sort of core community here. What I want to talk about today on the fat loss tip, the weight management tip, is what protein is doing to your fat loss efforts. Now, most of us have heard, how important protein is to dieting, quote unquote dieting, but what's it doing that's helpful? We're going to touch on a few of these things. Let me first say I'm talking about the macronutrient protein, or foods that are almost entirely protein. Don't confuse yourself that a fast food diet made of cheeseburgers is a good example of a high protein diet. There's plenty of refined gunk in most burgers, bringing loads of fat and other things. If this seems obvious to you, count yourself as astute. Let's just put it that way. I've seen dietitians conflate Big Mac type diets with high protein diets. Not that they're not, but they're largely discounting the fact, right, that one can have a super high protein diet of low fat cottage cheese or skinless chicken breast or egg whites and low fat veggie side dishes. Yes, again, fast food restaurants serve lots of greasy, sloppy protein foods, but let's be cautious. When I say high protein diets, I mean protein itself, or foods that are almost entirely protein. What are they going to do for you? Well, one, satiety. Protein is the most filling and satisfying of the macros. A lot of us know this. Some data suggest that even high single-digit grams of protein, as far as dose, may help with satiety, but almost certainly 20 to 40 grams of a solid protein food like chicken is going to help you stay full. I'm going to go out on a limb here and posit that the more chicken breast one eats, the leaner he or she is going to be over time. This is something I noticed when I was competing for bodybuilding and really had to restrict my calories and therefore raise my protein intake. We're going to get to that in a minute, why the calories and protein ratio is important. But when you're full of baked or pan-seared chicken breast, you're not full of French fries. It's sort of simple math. It's satisfying. It fills your stomach. Again, I noticed this when I was dieting for bodybuilding. I would add a pineapple ring to the pan-seared chicken when things, tasted dry. But I try to focus on the protein itself and keeping it high. Because again, as you cut more and more food out of your diet over a 20-week period, like a contest diet, you got to eat something. But what else is helpful about protein? Well, it's got the highest thermic effect of food of all the macros, right? Or the DIT, diet-induced thermogenesis. Protein is by far the most thermogenic of the macros. According to some texts, and I've seen studies as well, direct studies, carbs and fats have typically a mild 6 or 8% thermic effect of food, while protein induces more like a 20% rise, and for a longer period as well. It just makes sense to get this rise in metabolism. It's from hormonal and metabolic and, protein synthetic effects. That's a costly process of these complete proteins. So high thermic effect in addition to the satiety. So you got less calories coming in because it's satiating, and you've got more burn going out. No wonder it's a part of so many clinical and commercial diets. And that's a nice segue into our third point about why protein is so helpful for a dieting, quote unquote dieting. It maintains muscle mass and muscle health. Muscle mass is a driver of overall metabolic rate. So if we get more muscle mass, I've seen this exaggerated online, but if you look at some of the data, maybe 6 to 13 extra kcal burned per pound of additional muscle that you can build. So resistance training with adequate protein, that 1.6 grams per kg each day, that's a very standard amount. You maintain that driver of metabolic rate. It's not just for bodybuilders, it's for everybody because it's going to help keep up your metabolic rate, especially when you're in a negative energy balance, right? That can threaten your muscle mass because you're not getting enough calories. Gail Butterfield did groundbreaking work back in the 70s and 80s. She used to kind of go back and forth with my old advisor about, is it just about the calories? Like if you're in a surplus of calories, do you really need more protein? And, that kind of thing. It was a really interesting sort of collegial back and forth. But yeah, there is a relationship between calorie intake when it's low, like when you're dieting, right? Negative energy balance, your protein needs go up. Again, suffice it to say, you'll need more. So there are 3 big reasons why protein is so important on negative calorie kind of, dieting situations. Satiety, right? It's filling and satisfying. It has a high thermic effect, and it helps maintain muscle mass. These are all very, very important things for people who are trying to recompose, right? Because we don't want to just become smaller, but similarly flabby, if you will, versions of what we are at the beginning. We want to become leaner. We want to unveil some of that muscle mass, and protein really does help. Let me just wrap up by saying this episode and the next couple, I'm actually traveling. These were pre-recorded, so I want to get out the housekeeping stuff. Remember, we're going to work toward 100 episodes in exactly this type of roughly 10-minute format. Then we're going to move toward bumpers that separate these topics, once per week, all at once recording. Some of our existing listeners, they knew that this is going to happen to me, and it has, in fact. But we're going to move toward that around episode 100. I'd like to bring on the occasional co-host as well, student co-host or a partner, so it's not just me rambling for 45 to 65 or whatever minutes. But you'll be able to cut me off, of course, and just look at the news or the tips that you want anyway. And lastly, look for those Iron Radio simulcasts that we're going to do at least once a month moving forward. I figured if we pump them out through different channels, we can deal with this social media situation we're in right now with this quagmire of often bad and pod-fading podcasts that I think unfortunately misinform, but just clog the airways. Everyone is broadcasting regardless of their background. It's just sort of frustrating and it's hard to push through, but I'm hoping having sister podcasts, we can do that a little bit better. That's the idea. If you have a comment, you can reach us at Lawnman07 on our YouTube backup. And please think about leaving a review on iTunes. I know some of you already did, and we lost them. Again, it was because of a technical glitch. That's why we had a season 1 with 100 episodes, brief episodes. And moving into season 2, they're going to be once a week longer. And I'm hoping we can build more reviews and that kind of thing. So thanks so much for your patronage, and we'll see you later.
The NutritionRadio.org podcast is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, check with your physician, nutritionist, or qualified exercise physiologist in order to make the progress that you need.